When you walk into most schools today, what do you see? Desks that are in rows, maybe some tables, bells that schedule you where to go, time slicing classes and structures into small little pieces of learning, tons of multitasking and task switching put on our learners and our teachers and our school leaders all day long. In fact, much of this hasn't changed. And if you looked at it 100 years ago, many things would be very similar to what schools are today, which begs the question that we're going to ask in today's episode, which is, do we even need a new version of school? I'm AJ Juliani, and I'm the host of Next Gen Schools. And today we're going to be talking with Ira David Socol, the author of Designed to Fail, to be looking at that question. Should schools change? Who do they work for? Who don't they work for? And what can we do in today's world right now to change things for the better for all learners? Ira believes that most schools today are doing exactly what they were designed to do, not by accident, but by intentional design. And that's where our story begins today. Ira's path to education wasn't typical. He started as a police officer, and he'll tell you he wasn't exactly a model student growing up. But that's what makes his story so powerful, because he knows what it's like to be on the outside of a system designed for someone else.
If I go back to my life as a student, people would have predicted I was the last possible person who ever would have worked in schools. But they also would have predicted I was the last possible person who would have become a police officer, which was my first career. So I've fooled those graduation polls twice. I got into education as a second career because I truly wanted to see what was possible to do differently. I'm not the best school learner. I read really badly, and in fact, in the K-12 experience, didn't read at all. I literally read one picture book while I was in my K-12 life. I also am pretty ADHD, although age has calmed some of that physical stuff down, but not much. And those two things conspire to make life really difficult. But one of the things that I had as an amazing advantage was that being sent to an alternative high school, I stumbled into a high school that had been redesigned by Neil Postman of NYU. They created a school without walls for kids who were completely unsuccessful in school. And that showed me at the start that there was a possibly different way of doing things.
That alternative school experience stuck with him. It was a glimpse of what education could be: flexible, human, and built on trust. Years later, Ira found himself working in a rural county in Virginia, a sprawling district experimenting with how to make learning relevant for every student. That's when he started asking the question at the center of his book: if we know this system doesn't work, why do we keep doing it? Ira argues that the traditional model of school wasn't built on research or learning theory. It sure wasn't built on the science of learning. Instead, it was built on economic and political motives.
People, including far too many or even most education researchers, accept systems that were designed in the past as if they were natural, inevitable structures that developed. Nobody goes out and tries to prove the efficacy of the lecture, right? It's not, or the classroom desk, or the time, or the fact that we divide up kids by age or content by subject or time into little periods. People don't unpack that because they just accept the fact that all of this is what it is, and it is the baseline normal, and thus all new things that come along, all new suggestions have to be measured against something that's never been measured itself. Because none of these things were developed based on research. They were developed based on political and economic agendas.
He told me that 99% of schools today would be completely recognizable if we had a visitor come from 1910. And that's a problem, because the world and our kids have changed dramatically. So if we know the system is outdated, why do we cling to it? And it's not that people haven't tried to change schools. Ira points out that reformers for more than a century, from Dewey to modern innovators with micro schools, have been experimenting with better ways. But every time progress starts, the counter-revolution kicks in. If you ask Ira what holds back change, his answer might surprise you.
Another of my basic questions was, if we would disagree with all those goals, for example, grades 1 through 8 were designed to eliminate 80% of kids, so only 20% of kids went to high school. That was the design. That was the whole idea of grade level expectations being shifted from the concept of you do this and then you do that to this is what you do at this age. If we would disagree with those reasons, why would we continue to use the system? And my hope in writing the book was first to get these questions out there so people could start to doubt, which I think is the most important intellectual tool we have. But secondly, they could realize that just like those people in the past, we can make decisions as well.
It's a tough point, but one that hits home for every educator. Students aren't the ones resisting change. In fact, the ones who are keeping things the same are the adults involved. Still, not all schools are stuck in the past. In Virginia, Ira and his team tried radical experiments. Multi-age learning spaces, no bell schedules, project-based learning programs integrating physics and algebra and student-designed learning time.
I'll just say a few things that we did in Virginia that made a huge difference. When we had a chance to add to or rebuild an elementary school, we made multi-teacher K-5 classrooms. Sometimes up to 180 kids and 8 teachers. Kids could work with the teacher they best worked with. They could go to the learning level they were most connected to. We also put kitchens at the middle of them. Authentic, real learning of both social and, math and language and all sorts of other science and all sorts of other things that go with that. And, we weren't inventing this. We were largely copying what we saw in Ireland, with that kind of thing, and which has a much, much higher literacy level, so we're trying to imitate that. At the secondary level, we really tried to break down subject divisions. And we started programs where high school kids, for example, would spend half the day with 4 core subject teachers without a bell schedule, working on all subjects at once. And for instance, one of those schools, which was our highest poverty high school, the principal said, none of my kids get to take physics, so we're moving physics to 9th grade. We're going to do algebra and physics together in 9th grade, and that's what we're going to do. You can do these things with a little bit of courage and a little bit of good research.
He calls this kind of work subverting the system from within, starting small, proving it works, then scaling it up. But the biggest shifts weren't structural at all. Instead, they were cultural.
I guess one of the, biggest things is think about all of your policies. I was just up in Massachusetts working with teachers, and once again I said, every time you make a rule, you have to enforce it. And I said, I've been both a cop and an educator. I'd rather stay on the educator line of this, right? So enforcing laws is not what I want to spend my day doing in schools. So have fewer rules. It's my line. I ask people at this, why can't kids run in the halls? We had park horses in our school hallways. Why can't you do that? Why do you have rules about where kids can eat or drink? How anti-humane is that? We said kids could walk into a classroom and decide for themselves where, how, or if to sit. That alone cut our disciplinary referrals by 50%. Just doing that, eliminating all the things kids and teachers fight about all day, starts to build a culture of trust where learning can sort of happen. Intergenerational learning can can go on.
So where does technology fit in? AI, automation, adaptive tools, they're transforming every single industry, and education is next. And that's a theme we'll come back to again and again on this show. Will technology make learning more human or less? In Design to Fail, Ira writes that teachers spend an enormous amount of time trying to fight against the system in which they teach. Imagine what would happen if they could use all that energy and time to redesign the system instead.
I hope it plays a huge part, primarily because, when Pam and I do presentations, one of the slides we say is, in this case, 2025, pointing out the kids entering kindergarten this year will only turn 80 in the year 2100. These are kids living deep into the future. You can complain about phones and AI, and people used to complain about Wikipedia, the internet itself, Google, all these things. I watched all these things get attacked over the years. And yet, we're preparing kids for their century, not 1910, not 1970. And they will live in a world they do live in a world dominated by these technologies, and you either learn to use them or you don't learn to use them. You either learn to use them well or you don't learn to use them well. And let's face it, it's not happening at home.
And maybe that's the lesson from Ira's story and this first episode. Schools don't need to be torn down. They need to be reimagined from the inside out. If you take away one idea from today's episode, let it be this. Our schools were never neutral. They were built by people for specific purposes. That means they can be rebuilt too. The next generation of schools isn't just about technology or project-based learning or fancy new buildings. It's about designing places where every student belongs and thrives, not just survive. That's the journey we're starting right here. This is Next Gen Schools. Thanks for our guest today, Ira David Socol, author of Design to Fail. We'll put a link to his book and everywhere that you can contact him online and read his work in the show links. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to it wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to check out the video versions on YouTube. We're excited to share this work and look each week at how we can do learning better right now, not just in the future at Next Gen Schools. I'm your host, AJ Juliani. Thanks again for joining us. Until next episode.